Welcome to Gambling Chronicles number 12. This is going to be a Q&A episode. And I'm probably going to have a mixed bag of topics on here. So I'll probably just label this Q&A episode. I'm going to get to some topics here at some point. But definitely going to get to the extreme benefits of the Trump coin and why it's going to be one of the most dynamic coins of all time. We'll get to that at some point in the episode. But the first message I want to send out today is not to dwell on your past, okay? It's one of if bad things have happened to you or whatever, just try not to dwell on that shit. You dwell on that shit and it's going to fuck you up and make things even worse. And I'm going to give you some examples for that. And a lot of sports bettors do this with, they take a bad beat and then they just go on tilt and they just fire. I mean, a lot of the top level guys don't, but, there's some low level, medium level, maybe semi-pros, even some pros might do that. I know some guys who bet pretty massive that bet with their emotions when they start losing. And it's a fucking terrible quality to have. What you need to know fundamentally as a sports bettor or any kind of gambler, you need to know what your edge is. And if you know what your edge is, that's all that matters, okay? The beat doesn't matter. I've posted this a lot on Twitter, bad beats don't exist, because to me they don't. They only exist in your head. Now, yeah, you can have a bad beat and have it happen, but you almost got to get into a robotic mindset. Okay, my win rate is 57%, so part of the 43% of the time I lose, there's going to be bad beats mixed in there. So that's just part of it. So knowing your win rate is the most important thing, in my opinion. And the first hurdle, that's the first hurdle to get over. And when you understand that, maybe it'll help you not bet, because you just know the next bet you make is going to be whatever your win rate is for whatever type of market you're betting or whatever. So if you're a 57% guy and you're just picking off stuff in certain markets, then why go on fucking tilt? It's one of the dumbest things you can do. It's the same thing poker players do when they get stuck. They say they got to get even. They got to get even. They just got to get even in this game. But the truth of the matter is, if you're making $50 an hour or $100 an hour, then why do you have to get even? If the game's bad, you quit. It's the same thing with sports. If you have a bad game, you just don't bet it, because it just doesn't fit on the docket. So try not to, let that shit affect you when it comes to betting. You just got to be very robotic. And I'm going to get a little more into that when I cover somebody's post that they made on Twitter this week. I think it was Quantum. He made a post that, kind of made the rounds, and I'll give my thoughts on that. But yeah, again, don't dwell on your past, period. A lot of people do this when they're abusing alcohol or drugs. They always dwell on their past. I did this when I did this for years when I first started, going off the rails in the early to mid 90s, just drinking a ton of booze, smoking a lot of weed, and, dropping some acid from time to time, maybe more than time to time. But yeah, for me, it started when it's not why I went off the rails, but I would always blame, something that happened to me when I was younger. I was in 10th grade. I just finished my JV basketball season, and the coach that year didn't pick me to go on his summer league team. Now, I probably had already got into maybe the partying and stuff a little bit. Maybe he heard that, I don't know. And he just chose not to select me to go on his travel team that summer. I'm not sure. I have no idea. Could have been a multitude of reasons, but for me, when I wasn't chosen to go on there, I'd made the decision then, I'm not fucking playing basketball anymore. Fuck this guy. Instead of just working my ass off and going in there, I would have easily made the varsity team the next year, no problem. He picked some scrubs to go on that travel team. He didn't pick me, but I always dwelled on that, and it might have, me thinking like that might have contributed to my spiral. I wasn't like a college grade level player. Maybe if I worked my ass off, I could have played maybe some low division college hoops, but we're talking, I stopped playing when I was 15, but fourth grade, couldn't shoot two-handed. Fifth grade, taught myself how to shoot. Seventh grade, I'm now the best player in my town in my age group. Ninth grade, I played D Brown at a basketball camp. I scored 4 or 5 points on him. No one in the camp scored a point on him. I mean, he let me shoot a couple of times, but I did hit a couple of shots while he did defend me. But when he got the ball, he just fucking dunked on me 3 or 4 times. But that was probably the highlight of my life athletically, was getting to play him in a game of one-on-one. But, at the time, that was everything to me, was basketball. I put so much into that for 6 years, and then all of a sudden I threw it away. I made a bad decision, and always looked back on that, like, as I'm going through, spiraling over the years. That was like one of the bigger things. But like, maybe you don't have the support system around you at the time. I probably didn't. But again, and it's harder to understand this when you're younger, especially, for a guy like me then, when I was like 15, 16, it's hard to just say, oh, let's just get past this and go do this. You do what you think is right, and oftentimes it's the wrong thing. So in any event, I don't want to spiel too much more on this, but, if you are going through some shit, try not to dwell on your past and bad things that happen to you. And if you do, then, maybe seek some help or something to try and get you through it, because it's just a bad mindset to get into when you're constantly dwelling on your past. And it can correlate into, like with sports bettors and, people that go on tilt betting. Something just happened and they dwell on that moment and it takes them for a ride. So, just don't dwell on your past. I can't stress it enough. So, and anybody that's dealing with, any kind of tilt when it comes to like sports betting or poker, I would recommend getting this book called Elements of Poker. And this is the primary book that got me into the mindset of your win rate is your win rate. If you're playing your A game, you're playing your A game. That means you're going to make X amount of dollars per hour. And when I read that book, it kind of changed my life. And it's very simplistic. It's probably 15 to 20 years old at this point, but the stories hold true, and it can keep you, I just refer back to that a lot. I've read it like 2 or 3 times, and it keeps me in the right mindset. And some people just lack emotional control when it comes to making decisions. But I think, you read a book like this and it might change it. Anything's possible. Like, like whatever I'm doing today, like I was completely broke in 2009. I borrowed $100 off a kid for, I think I had to give him back 125. And this is like right when I started getting sober. And I ran up from 25, 50 cents, before you know it, I'm playing 100, 200. All those years of playing poker online from 2004 to like 2009, that was kind of like my poker college, and just learning this and learning that. But I wasn't able to put it all together until I got clean. And then, same thing with props. I jump in and, I'm betting 100 to 250. At this point, I had a bankroll. Next thing I'm betting 500. Then I'm betting 2,000. Then I'm getting 5,000, 4,000 average on, props across the board. And this is like when they were super, super easy. Still beatable now, but not quite as when I was betting them at a heavy scale for, massive amounts of money. Massive amounts meaning in the prop world. And then before you know it, 20K on some props, and then just getting large amounts down on the Super Bowl, etc. So anything's possible. I started from nothing, absolutely nothing. And, you can turn it into something if you're patient, if you make the right decisions and you don't go on tilt. So, it is possible. You just got to work, take risks when the time is right. And if you don't take risks in obvious spots, then you're going to grind forever and you're never going to get to that next level to move on. I'm going to refer to a guy that gets some bets down for us right now. And we have some stuff that's winning, probably like 65%. And he was betting small amounts for us. And we asked him why. And he said, he was practicing bankroll management, which is fine. Totally respect that he was practicing bankroll management. But at the same time, when you have spots that come up that are, the stuff that's going in is so good at 65%, you should probably throw the bankroll management to the side. That's how you're going to grow your bankroll. You need to find spots like that where you can bet more, take a little bit of risk, but you also know that maybe at worst, when these plays run bad over a sample, they're probably just going to break even. You're not going to lose. So anyhow, I'll get to a little of that a little bit later in the episode. Another thing I want to touch on is wall money. If you're dealing with paperhead bookies or local bookies, whatever you want to call them, when you start seeing if they're paying you every week in hundreds, and then you start seeing crinkled 20s or, old hundreds consistently, I'm talking hundreds from the 70s and 80s, there's a good chance that they're going to be going broke soon. So, it's not 100%. Maybe they got paid from someone, they paid you with that. But in my experience, when you start seeing that type of money getting floated around, that's when the end might be near, or you might be getting stiffed at some point soon. So take notice of that. Another thing I want to cover, and some of this stuff is going to be repetitive. It's kind of funny because I can think back to let's just some examples, something Spanky or Rufus said that resonates in my head from their podcast, and I can remember it. And maybe I would see Rufus or Spanky and bring it up, and they would have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. Or they, you can remember certain things, at least it is for some people. You can remember the important things that somebody said, but, I've probably talked now for over 12 to 15 hours on these podcasts. And some of these, I can't remember if I covered some of these topics or not, because you just don't remember when you're speaking. So, I've definitely covered this, and I want to cover this because this constantly comes up with people I have meetings with or whatever. And it is, major markets and trying to beat major markets or make a living in major markets. Can you? Yes. Is it hard? Yes. I choose not to make my living, for the most part, betting in major markets. When I say major markets, I'm talking about the major sports that have the most liquidity. And a lot of people that want to be movers or whatever, they'll say, yeah, but I don't want to cook my accounts. I'd rather just get it in where it blends in and, it looks good. You're betting MLB or you're betting NBA or whatever it is. But the truth of the matter is, you're just more likely, at least from what I've seen over the last 10 years, to go on sick losing streaks in MLB or whatever it is. NBA maybe too, but for the MLB, NFL, this stuff, especially NFL, you just don't get a huge sample for the year. And I'm not saying that these sports aren't beatable. I'm just saying somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I want to move bets. And I say, okay, well, we're betting this, and this. And then they say, well, that's not going to be good for my accounts. Well, then I say, okay, you want to bet major markets? Then talk to this guy. Okay, then they go talk to that guy. Then they start betting the major markets. Then they start losing. And then they'll come back to me and say, why am I getting crushed here? And it's because that's what happens when you're betting major markets. You're just more likely to go on some losing streaks and lose for longer periods of time than on stuff that has higher edge, where maybe your accounts do get cut sooner. But the thing is, and this is always what I've always said, and I'll use Spanky as an example here, because he used to say, like, props were dumb because you'll get your accounts cut. And while that is true, on one hand, if you beat a college basketball line, the close, by 4 or 5 points, if you're anything, if you beat consistently beating an NFL closing line by 3 or 4 points, that might look worse than putting a rugby bet in to certain bookies. In my opinion, a sharp bookie is a sharp bookie, and a square bookie is a square bookie. And I think Carl Cust Service said this on his, Circles Off interview. And this is another thing that, like, just recall that I have that somebody said. And it is, it's a 2-point, if you get +4 on an NFL game and it closes like whatever, I don't know, -2, and you got the +4, I mean, as a bookie could see that, you crushed the close, but, you put in some, Australian rugby or something like that, you could beat the close by 50 points, but what do they have to gauge against that? They don't really have anything. Obviously, if you're betting sports like that, and if you're winning, yeah, your accounts are going to get cut, but you're winning. And you're not going to get into these, sometimes these endless holes where it's going to be, you'll be fighting to get out of these holes maybe till the middle of college basketball in some cases. So that's just my philosophy, why and I totally understand why people do bet major markets. It's easier to get down, but, I would rather just win consistently in smaller markets than bet on stuff that's going to have the lower ROI where you have to get a shitload down. I don't know. That's just how I feel with that. So, let me see here. And the other thing is with with bookies dealing with this stuff, especially with like paperheads, like if you turn over 200 rocks, okay, meaning bookies, you're going to find some in there that they're just going to let you go, and they're going to let you fire, and they might let you fire for years or months. They're all different. Not everyone will. But if you turn over enough rocks, you're going to find what you're looking for under some of them. So that's just my philosophy. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Stay away from the major markets unless it's specific scenarios which I'm going to cover in a future podcast, where it's beneficial to bet major markets in certain scenarios, but not betting them at large scale yourself. That's just my model. That's what I think. Everyone's different, but yeah. So, and then let me see here. Another thing I wanted to touch on here was the Feinsod 25K prop bet. I don't know. They bet on Brett Feinsod. I think it's NBA Green Beans. He bet on how many games have been played in the NBA season, and he was counting both teams' games instead of how many games were actually played, which would be half of both team, all the win-loss records combined. Made a dumb prop bet for 25K. I think he paid the guy off, but if you accept a bet, whether the other guy was meaning to pay, or you weren't going to pay, or you didn't think he was going to pay, or whatever it is, and you got 5 to 10,000 followers on Twitter, and you accept, why would you even put yourself in a position to accept that bet? You thought you were free rolling. The other guy thought he was free rolling. It's just a fucking idiotic spot to put yourself in. And if you put yourself in that spot, I don't know, a lot of people are saying he shouldn't have paid, and he didn't pay. I think he paid the guy like $1,000. But don't put yourself in a fucking spot where people can comment on that by making a dumb bet. It's just stupid. Just one of the dumbest things. If Spanky had accepted something like that, or Rufus, or Pizzola, or, any of these guys, any of these bigger name guys in the industry, if they accepted a bet like that, they would have fucking paid it off. 100%. But I don't think any of them are dumb enough to accept a bet like that on the fly unless they really know they held the nuts. And this kid clearly wasn't sharp enough to know that he was dead wrong on this. So just wanted to touch on that real quick. Something I had on my list of thoughts here. What else do we got here? Yeah, going back to the major market stuff. There's a lot of young guys in this space. Some of them, most of them are like movers and stuff. They just don't know how to vet a lot of the stuff that people are giving them, whether it's good or bad. They might not know that it's just so low edge, and they're just being used as a piece of the pie to get down for a larger group who's looking to get down a shitload of money so they can crank out their whatever it is, 1% ROI or 0.5% ROI. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if you're the guy at the top, but, a lot of young guys have a hard time determining whether what they're betting is good or not. So that's something you need to get good at if you're moving stuff for bigger groups. That's why, again, I would rather be betting on, European lacrosse than, just about anything at this point in the year, because it's going to win. Maybe at worst you're going to break even, and you're just not going to go on these massive downswings, which don't happen all the time, but they do happen, and they seem to happen more often in baseball than any other sport. I don't know if it's, there's just things change all the time. The air changes, the ball changes, just a ding off the bat a certain way, and, everything could go sideways. So, let me see, what else do we got here? Yeah, nice guys finish last. So if somebody's sending like late turn-ins, you need to speak up. There's a guy who we've been working with, and, just for like a day or two, sent us back some turn-ins that were very late, but he just didn't know. And I mean, I'm pretty sure all the stuff won too, or, the majority probably won, but he just didn't know. And it's like, no, that's how the stuff needs to come in before the game. And another guy I know who was going through like a major group, he got a few plays that came in like when the game was like 90% over, and they lost, and it was probably a coincidence. Probably just a coincidence, somebody just turning in a shitload of tickets late. But if you do get into that situation, you could get free rolled, and it's good to investigate it and find out why are these coming in late? Is this normal? Sometimes you have to build trust with certain people to do that, but if you don't know, you don't know. And you could be dealing with somebody potentially. I'm not saying any of these guys that I'm talking about now are free rolling, but anybody in general. You could be dealing with somebody that's just going to try and free roll you at every chance they can, and that's somebody you don't want to be working with. So it's good to keep an eye on that stuff. And it's harder to keep an eye on this stuff, if you have 100 or 200 accounts /out, something like that. Like for me, it's harder to keep an eye on every little nook and cranny. I mean, you got to try and do the best job you can on everything, but you just never know. I mentioned this on a prior podcast too. Like there was one account where the bookie just kept deleting plays every week, and this account lost like 17 weeks in a row, but it was just such a small account that the way we were doing the accounting, it just wasn't getting cross-checked the right way, and the guy fucking stole some money from us. And, like maybe when I had 5 accounts, I would have kept an eye on this stuff a lot more, rather than, now. Not saying I don't keep an eye on anything, but now, there's more people that I work with that have their eyes on this type of stuff, and it's just not me relying on it. So, you need to put safeguards in place, or you could get robbed. Just make sure you protect yourself in every scenario so you're not getting free rolled. So yeah, the more I network and the more people I deal with, the more I deal with this stuff because just not everybody knows, or eventually you're going to run into a bad apple who's going to try and take advantage of you in some which way. Let me see here. And I already kind of covered this. And the other thing about the major market stuff that can play a role on like your psychology and your mind, and when the stuff's just losing for long periods of time, and you're not the one originating it, you're the one moving it. It can be frustrating. Like we had a big account with someone like 5 years ago, crushing the closing line in MLB by 30 cents, but at the same time, we lost like 100 units in a row, like insane stuff. So it's like, I don't know. You're probably better off taking this. In my opinion, if you're just a small mover, I would take the summer off versus betting that stuff, or just bet the stuff that you're not going to lose at. And it's hard to know that as a mover, and everybody will always come back and say, "Hey, well, the accounts are going to get smoked, this and that." Well, then get fucking better at finding accounts. That's all it is. You have to get better at replacing accounts or finding places to get the good stuff down. And if you can't, then stick with betting the major sports and live with the variance. It sucks, but whatever. You just need to network more and find more accounts and more markets. Let me see here. What else do we got here? Oh yeah, so when you are networking too, and this comes up, and I think I'm going to have a question coming up here from the Q&A. You know, what can you offer somebody? Like, are you unique? Can you do something that somebody else can't? Like, because I'm not going to say like the best originators are a dime a dozen. They're not, but there's so many originators out there, and there's so many groups, and so many this and so many that. How can you fit into the puzzle for somebody else, or how can they fit into the puzzle for you? Are you unique? Can you do something at a better scale than somebody else can't? Like, especially when it comes to originating. And I think I'm going to have a question coming up on this, but like, are you beating Bovada, or are you beating FanDuel at post, or whatever it may be? Like, how fucking good are you? Are your numbers fake? Are you up 7 billion units betting at like Bet365, or are you beating Bookmaker at post? Like, are you beating MLB overnights, or can you bet any time during the day on game day? There's big differences in all of that stuff there. Let me see here. Let me see here. Yeah, the biggest problem I'm still running into is, and it's not really a problem, it's just organization. We had backlogged figures going, into Thursday, which was kind of normal for what we were dealing with at the time, and then it scaled it back to Wednesday, then Tuesday, and now they're all almost done on Monday. But that stuff, it just happens. That's the biggest stuff that we're dealing with right now. The biggest problems with the stuff we're betting is just the organization of it all. And we're trying to organize it as best we can, but and just trying to make it easy. Like, I don't want to be sitting behind the screen every day, and I have been pretty much, not 7 days a week, but not like glued to the screen, but more than I'm used to at this time of year. So, might have to hire somebody to take on some of the role to make sure, everything just continues running optimally. Because when you start to scale and start to involve multiple people and multiple groups and whatever, there's just a lot that goes into it. You have to have your eyes on everything. If you don't have your eyes on everything, it can just go to shit. If it goes to shit, then what good is it? So don't scale too fast. I mean, if you try to scale too fast, it's just, I've said this before, it's like carrying 100 plates. You're going to drop them. One step, you're going to drop them at some point. So before I get to these questions here, I'll go through some Twitter posts here. We'll go over this Quantum Sport post where he posted, this kind of made the rounds on X, 50K views. So, a lot of people read this. A couple gambling groups that I'm in with multiple people posted this and their thoughts on it. So he said, I don't know this guy. I don't think we've ever spoken, but he said, I've made enough gambling that I'll never have to work again, and possibly my kids as well. I still think it's very close to whether gambling was a net positive in my life. I'm just going to kind of compare this to like what I think and how it has been for me. And it's going to be different for everybody, but overall, there's a lot more in this post, which I will cover. But I've made enough gambling myself where I'm pretty comfortable right now. I don't know if my kids are never going to have to work again quite yet, but whether it was a net positive in my life personally, 100%. Like gambling saved me. Gambling kind of killed me as I was going through like alcohol, drugs, all that shit over, 15, 16 year period. Gambling was definitely part of it, but it's also what saved me. It's what I gravitated towards and what kind of helped pull me out of the hole. So this, without a doubt, was a net positive on my life, 100%. But it's different for everybody. I'm not like knocking him or anything for this, but for me, 100% net positive. If you can turn it into a positive, then it's great, but there are some drawbacks to it. Even if you win, which after adjusting for the time value, probably 0.1% of people really ever will. It's extremely degenerate and not in a funny way like people joke on here. It physically alters your brain, changing your outlook and your ability to enjoy normal life. I mean, that is true. Like that's one thing. Like you get into situations socially or, anything with your family, friends, whatever, and everything's being calculated by EV for a lot of successful gamblers. Like I remember a poker player used to argue with his wife about like the EV of her throwing away like a quarter tube of toothpaste or whatever it may be. But it does change it changes your outlook and your ability. I wouldn't say to enjoy normal life, but depending on how deep you get wrapped into it, for sure, it will change your brain. My brain's been altered 100% by gambling, a zillion percent. I wouldn't say it's changed my ability to enjoy normal life, but I kind of get what he's talking about there. Like, it's harder for me to enjoy, like, just turning on a Celtics regular season game and watching it. It's more fun when it was actually more fun when I was a degenerate and I wanted the dopamine rush of somebody covering or something. Now I could give a shit less. Unless it's, something, I'll probably watch the NBA finals and I'm fine with that. I don't need to have money on it, but it certainly can change your outlook and your ability to enjoy normal life. I can see that. And that I think that happens to a lot of people because you just get wrapped up and it's a completely different world. And when you think about it, for like the successful gamblers, it's like from somebody on the outside looking in, it's like wildly crazy what we do. Another loss is that I've also almost no appreciation for sports or competition anymore. Basically can't sit through anything without action. I used to just love enjoying a game. Of course, watching sports on TV is kind of a waste of time compared to fitness, family, making money, so this was a positive. I'd actually say that's helped me too, and I kind of just covered that, but if I have a game going at night, I don't need to stay up and watch it. I just go to bed. I know how much the sleep means to me and how how thrown off I'll be if I stay up late, sweat a game, which doesn't matter because I covered this earlier. Like your win rate's your win rate. So I just go to bed and that's it. Wake up in the morning and go. Once in a while I'll stay up and watch a game, but for the most part, no. So that certainly a positive for me too when I eventually got to the point where I didn't need to stay up and watch the games anymore. And I think for most people that will come at a point when the money isn't as meaningful as it once was. When the money is like really really meaningful, and you're depending on it, like you're living and dying off it, almost like where it could not make or break you, but it really means something. I can see why you're emotionally attached to the results, but once you get to a certain level, I just think the money becomes less meaningful. Unless you're originating the stuff and you're really wrapped into how it's going to do, then I don't know. It's just you're better off just waiting till Monday to see the results. And that's what I try to do now. This stuff that we might get from like originators that we bet, but I don't even track the stuff. I just want to see how it did on Monday. That's it. I have somebody tracking it for me. They have somebody tracking it for them. Let's just look at the sheet Monday. Sweating it in between is just a waste of time and a waste of energy. Let me see here. What else here? Being reasonable is probably a slight positive for me, as I would have just got into some other degen shit like gaming and alcohol. Well, I had that before, so that's kind of what took me out of that. Let me see. At some point in my life, badly needed the money, so without it, I would be in the same spot. Plus, I would have a plus of money, less time for fitness, family. But for most, you should absolutely stay away. I would agree. I mean, most normal, regular people, especially if you have compulsive, like impulses that are like compulsive, stay the fuck away. I'm extremely fortunate that I was able to pull myself through and get onto the right side of this, but it's very hard to do. I have some friends I have multiple friends that are in GA right now because of all this shit, whether it's horse racing or I had a friend put 100K bet live. I didn't have him put it, but he put like 100K live soccer bet. DraftKings Snap accepted it. I think he won it too. Can't remember, but people that have like gambling impulses like that, you should stay away. But whatever, as far as banning it, he says 100% in favor, but with the caveat that it should be like it was where degens can play offshore. Because the violation of civil liberties and use of resource would be better put towards other crimes. But certainly at a bare minimum, any form of advertising should be banned. Basically, it should be like SIGs. I agree, the advertising should be banned, but as far as banning it, no, I'm not in favor of that. And I think if this guy has enough money, he says, to retire and have his kids retire. But what if you didn't have that money and you were getting into it now? Would you be in favor of banning it? Probably not. So, but I get what you're saying here. Like, sure, it's probably going to be a net negative, but people are going to find a way to gamble regardless. But I would agree that with all these prop parlays and all this shit that all these young kids are getting into, it certainly is a net negative, but everybody should be able to make their own decisions. But the advertising certainly should be banned. A lot of this post I can resonate with, and I don't know, it's a pretty good post to look at and, digest, because, it does resonate with me, and it probably resonates in different ways with other people. Let me see. Unbiased. Here, I'll start this Q&A. Need an unbiased deep dive on LeBron versus Jordan. It's very simple. You can make an argument of anything with anything, okay? The truth of the matter is, LeBron and Jordan eras pretty much crossed. Jordan was kind of in his late comeback thing there when LeBron came into the league, I think the very next year after Jordan left, when he had those last few years with the Wizards. So the eras are close enough where you can come up with your own opinion on who the better player was. Now, when you judge better player, I mean, yeah, you you could just say, all right, LeBron is more physically gifted. He does more things better, whatever. Okay. But at some point, the winning has to come into the equation. It's the same thing with Tom Brady and Pat Mahomes. There's people out there already saying, oh, Pat Mahomes is already the greatest of all time. That's impossible to say. I mean, you can say that if you want, but you're just dead wrong. Just like the LeBron over Jordan people are. You're just dead wrong. And we'll just cover the Mahomes Brady thing. Okay. If you're going to rate them, maybe you would rate Mahomes a 99, and maybe you would rate Brady, I don't know, a 98, or however you want to do it. But the bottom line is, they did play twice in big games, and Brady won both of them. Beat him in a Super Bowl, beat him in an AFC championship on his own field, retired with every passing record, and has 7 Super Bowls. So it's not even possible to make an argument that one guy is better than the other. You can't even make the argument. Even if he won 3 in a row this year, you can't make that argument. Now, as far as the LeBron thing, yeah, maybe you could argue he's a 100 or 99 and Jordan's a 98 or 90, whatever you want to do. But the bottom line is, Jordan was the best player in his era, pretty much from start to finish, or at least in the middle of his era. I mean, you could make the argument, Larry Bird was the best player for a few years, or maybe Magic Johnson or whoever in those early years. But the bottom line is, 3 straight championships, come back for a half year, don't win one, and then win 3 more. You have the team that sets the record for the most wins in there. So, you win 6 titles out of 6.5 years. As the best player in the league, retire with 30 points per game, won every single playoff series where your team was the higher seed, you won. Arguably the best defensive player in the league, definitely the best defensive player at his position. Defensive player of the years, scoring, 28 to 35 points a game every season. When the dead ball era in the 90s, teams were averaging 90, 95 points, and he's putting up 30, 35. That's just the way it was then. Another thing people give Jordan a knock on was he couldn't shoot the 3 great. And I think if he wanted to shoot the 3 great, he probably could have shot the 3 great. The problem was, for Jordan, he played in an era where the 3-point shot, it wasn't about the 3-point shot. It was the mid-range, down low stuff, and he was the best ever at that. He's better than any guy right now at that. Get him the ball in the post, top of the key, around the key, or drive into the basket. Nobody in the history of basketball was better than him at that. And that's all he needed to do. He didn't need to shoot 3-pointers. He did sometimes, but I don't think he was going into the gym saying, all right, I'm going to work on my threes because we're going to do this. That's just not the way their offense ran. Their offense ran with him getting the ball in the high to mid post and just dominating the other team. And that's just what he did. Another one people throw in there with the LeBron Jordan argument is they throw in that his team won 55 games without him, I think, after he retired. But when he came back, within a year or two, they won over 70 games. So that's a 15 win jump. So whatever. I'm not denying LeBron's a great player, but you have to, if the errors are that close, then you got to come to something. Who won the more championships? And, like people will say, well, LeBron had to run into these super teams with like Durant and whoever. Well, guess what? Jordan was the super team because of him, okay? He was the super team because of him. So, very simple. Jordan dominated his era more than LeBron dominated his era. You can make an argument Kobe dominated this era more than LeBron. Steph Curry has 4 championships in this era. He's tied for second for the most championships, and he's been playing for 50 years now. So whatever, you can argue anything you want, but the bottom line is one guy got 6 pretty much in a row in the prime of his career and just dominated the league at a higher level than LeBron dominated the league while he was in. Longevity, give it to LeBron, but that doesn't make you the best. The best rises above everything. They're usually the best player at the time, and they win the most championships because they're just driven like that. So that's it. Jordan over LeBron, easy one. Just like Brady over Mahomes, super easy. Let's see here. Question I've always wondered. How do betting apps know what happens instantaneously? Are there boots to the ground at every event? No, there's not. They just rely on as fast data feeds as possible. And this brings up another topic of court siding, where there's people at games that are getting the feeds faster than the books are, which I think is totally fine. If you're taking bets on live stuff, you're at the mercy of taking bets on live stuff. And if somebody's court siding you, you deserve it, or just take the market down. That's it. Pull the market out. If you don't have the ability to book it correctly, then don't fucking offer it. And I don't feel bad for any of them, because a lot of those sites will they'll put a bet into review on live betting, on a lot of live betting. They'll put it into a little review thing. And based on what happens over the next 30 to 60 seconds, they may accept it or reject it. If the plays go against you and you have a slow feed and you put a bet in, they could free roll you for a few points. So again, fuck them all. Get your software better, get it fixed, or you're at the mercy of getting court-sided. So yeah, that's it for these questions from today. I have a bunch that were, let me see here. We have a slew of questions here. All right, from Amber Gambling. Let me see here. Real Talk China. What would it take for someone to turn 1,000 into 100,000? What would the win rate be? I mean, almost perfect, right? Curious. And would that better be more elite than, say, somebody who starts at 100,000 and makes 100,000? We spend a lot of time on GOAT and NBoss blowing on gambling Twitter, but should we? Really seems hard for someone with a low bankroll to get to that level without selling picks. You should still not sell picks. Hold on. Let me see here. So basically, this was covered, I think, by Captain Jack. He said, you have X ROI, 4% ROI, you make X amount of bets per day, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think it's going to be very high. That is doable, but it's going to be hard to do that. And I think what you need to do is you need to find something. You need incredible patience to do it that way. But, what you really need to do, and this is how you're going to get from 1,000 to 100,000. And you can do that by finding these 4% edges or whatever. But like how I built my bankroll, I think would be the optimal way. Now, finding stuff like this now is probably harder, but it does exist. It's out there. Originate some market that nobody else is, or get better at originating some market that somebody else does. Now, it's just very simple. If you have like a 65% win rate on something that's minus 120 in a random market, you're going to have like an 18.8% ROI. That's what you need to do. That's how I would go from 1,000 to 100,000. I would try and master a market where you're just pulling in that 18.8% ROI consistently. And then you can press your bankroll even more and more and more and more. And like I talked about earlier in this podcast, when you go through bad stretches, it's mostly going to be break-even stretches. It's not going to be, you're not going to be getting throttled unless your model goes completely off the rails or whatever. If you can get to a point where you know your true win rate and you can get a good amount down, that's how I would try to get from 1,000 to 100,000. And then when you get to when you do eventually get to 50 or 100,000, I mean, I think it's a much easier. I mean, to go from 100,000 to 1,000,000 is way easier than, even going from from 10,000 to 100,000. It seems that way to me. Even though it's 10, you're just in, when you get to 100,000, I think there's more opportunities out there for you to network, expand, and dip your toes in other little things where you can go from 100,000 to a million easier, or going from 1 million to 2 million or 3 million. Same thing. When you're dealing with more people and you're networking with more stuff, and you're not just more of a lone wolf who's grinding up from that 1,000 to 100,000, it's gonna be a little more difficult. So I don't know. I just would find something that you can master, that you can do better than anybody else, and do it that way. I'm not opposed to the 3% edge on, or 4% edge on this and that and the other thing, and grinding up that way. That's a good philosophy for some people, but I've done it. I've just told you, I've taken $100, progressively moved it up, but how I got ahead in certain areas was taking shots when I knew I had a huge edge. I knew I had a huge edge playing heads up poker. I got to pick my opponents more or less. So I was a fool to be playing lower stakes. I would just play higher stakes. So I don't know. It just depends on what you're betting. I just think you're better off. The average bettor that is trying to make money is better off focusing on smaller markets than focusing on bigger markets. And I don't think anyone could make a good argument on the other side unless they're trying to sell you a product. If they're trying to sell you a product, then they're going to try and make an argument on that side. But there's just no way, it's just very simple. I got the math here. If you do have $100,000 bankroll, okay, which I had at one point, my win rate was about, I was winning 65%. Some years I might have won 70% on these props, mostly college football props. If you place 83 bets at minus 120, that's $100,000. Okay. You go 54 and 29, that's 65%. Find a way to do that. Okay. Find a way to do that when you have $1,000. But I did this at $100,000, and I pressed as good as I could because I knew I had a win rate where my worst weeks I'm going to break even maybe. And that's just how it went. So you do that, you get back, you're going to get back. You're going to win 54,000 off those 54 wins, and then you're going to get 64,800 back on your risks. There you go. You got $118,800, 18.8% ROI. But you need to find your win rate and know that it's true. If you know that it's true, then you can take more risks and almost not throw bankroll management out the window, but know that you can take bigger risks, knowing that you're likely not going to go bust. If you don't take those risks and you try to just do like 1% of your bankroll, then I think chances are you're going to fail a lot more often trying to get to a certain level. You have to find that edge. You have to take those risks. If you can't find that edge and you're not good at originating, then you probably should, then just take it slow and do what you know how to do. Don't try and do something that's out of your comfort zone. But, sometimes, if you do try something, maybe you will find something. It's possible. People find things all the time, and people find ways to be better at things than people that have been doing them for a long time. It's just running it up and getting the money there so you can scale higher. That's all a different thing. But you need to find, that's what I would do. I would try and find something that you can beat better than anybody else. And there is stuff out there. You can find it. You just have to be better than somebody else at doing it. It's possible. Let me see here. From Bet Bites. Hey, China. Got through all your episodes today. Great listen. Still would love to know what my betting resume should look like when looking for funding from a mover. I kind of said this earlier in the podcast. You need to show as much information as you can. And, are you betting on Bovada? Are you betting DraftKings? Are you betting DraftKings openers? Are you betting stale lines on random sites? Like, a mover probably isn't going to want to fund somebody that's doing all that stuff, because that's like a dime a dozen stuff. You need to be unique. You need to show that you can do something that somebody else can't. So he says here, bet stamp record, my own spreadsheets of tracking. The more you can show somebody, the better. Then they can maybe take a look at it, analyze it. They're going to quiz you. But the bottom line is, most of the people I talk to are up. They tell me they want to do this, they want to do that. They're up a bazillion units, but they're betting at, some casino in East Bumfuck that doesn't move the lines, or or like I said before, they're beating Bovada or something like that. When you go to somebody, a mover, they're not going to be betting your stuff probably at Bovada. They probably don't have a Bovada account. I mean, some people have access there, but to have access on a large scale where they're going to want to bet the stuff that you're beating, it's not going to work. And they're not going to want to just maybe bet $500 on some random game that you beat on Bovada and just bet it on Bovada. They're going to want to bet it at scale. So what you need to do is have as much specific information available as you can to show somebody. And let me see what else this says here. Also, while I don't originate specific odds, I have a directional accurate model for a couple of sports. I think that's very good. You don't have to have the most accurate model, quote unquote. It just needs to do better than whoever's setting the lines. That's all. Let me see. How should I show a prospective mover? I mean, you just got to give as much information as you can, show your win rate, and they'll vet you, maybe look at the stuff. Some people can tell just by looking at it. If it's specific enough, they'll be able to tell whether it's useful or not to them. Some people might not. Some people might give you a shot. Some people might not give you a shot. But the more information, the better. How much is too much, too little in terms of giving away my edge? Would love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, I would be careful with giving away how you're coming up with certain stuff, but I would just kind of give a broad example of how you're doing it, not to the exact thing, but be able to show as much information as you can, win rates, units, percentages, where did you win, etc. I would definitely just compile as much information and just talk to as many people as you can. And the people that you want moving for, that you will want to move your stuff, will be able to accurately determine whether your stuff is any good or not. You might be better off just, if you're beating the stuff, and the only way you probably really want to get to a mover too is if you don't have money. But if you are beating this stuff, you should have some money where you should be able to kind of run it up. You should have somewhat of a bankroll. So yeah, if you're looking for a mover, show them as much as you can. And then, maybe they'll put you in action. Maybe they won't. It just depends on what you're doing and where you're beating it. How hard is it to arb sports markets while keeping your accounts from getting limited closed? Thanks. And this was from Adam Schwartz. Let me see here. I mean, it's hard. I mean, if you're arbing sports, then you're getting the best price on both sides. So you're just gonna get limited. That's it. You could see it with all these guys up and down on Twitter. They're all getting limited. Then they don't quote unquote know how to get. You're better off trying to gauge which side of that arb is the right side. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with arbing, but personally, if you're going to grow, you're not going to do it arbing. You can get your bankroll to a certain point arbing, but then you're going to probably run out of accounts. And then what are you going to do after that? You're not teaching yourself anybody. Then maybe you'll become a mover for a bigger group. I don't know. But the bottom line is, those accounts are going to get limited. They're going to get closed. So that's it. It's very hard, That's why, like I said, a lot of these guys, you see them with their odds jam records up and down on Twitter. Yeah, they're all fucking cut. They make a name for themselves doing this and that, and then they wind up in a Discord selling picks because they don't know how to bet. And maybe they didn't make enough connections to people who actually win at betting to do something else. So, and that's why most of those guys are scammers, and maybe they're not scamming, but their product probably isn't worth what they're charging, even if it's just a little amount. And it may look appealing to some because it's such a low price per month, etc., but that adds up for them, and they and that's how they make a living. So just remember that, you guys. Learn how to bet, learn how to do other things. You got to learn how to do everything from A to Z. I mean, you just got to be able to pivot. I've tried to put myself in a position where if I can't originate, then I have to fucking pivot, and I could do something else. I could move. I could whatever. Just whatever. There's a multitude of things you can do once you have a big enough bankroll, but you need to be able to learn to do everything if you're going to pivot and do something else, or you're going to be learning on the fly. It's better to learn everything as you're going. So I'm glad I didn't start off as, an arbor. I was able to find spots where I knew I was on the right side of most of the bets, and that's it. I didn't have a lot of competition in the market, so it was easy for me. So I wouldn't say it was easy. I found it, so it was easy, but it was a lot of work at the same time. So let me see here. If you don't mind asking, brother, how did you get into podcasting? Just said fuck it and started doing it. This is from a DM. So getting into podcasting kind of just came on. It was I can go back to some stuff where all this started. So betting is certainly lonely. There's a lot that you feel like, maybe you want to share with some people. You share with, your friends and your family might know what you do, but they really don't understand. You can kind of share the information with your peers, etc., that you work with. You can share, some of the stuff, but like, Rufus has talked about this a lot, is like, it's hard to get. I think that's why he wanted to do that. He did like a Super Bowl prop article, like, I don't know what it was, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, whatever it was. And with the Washington Post, it's like, you don't get a lot of recognition like doing this. And you might be doing something crazy. Some people don't care for it. Other people do. I think part of the podcast for me is some form of recognition of like the amount of work and the amount of information that I have, and, about a lot of the knowledge that I can share with people. Like early on, I think, I was talking with like Jeff Ma from Bet the Process about going on there. That didn't work out. I didn't get on there for whatever reason. And, there was a lot that I felt that, I maybe could have talked about because, at the time, I was getting in, $500,000 to $1 million on the Super Bowl every year. And they were doing those Super Bowl episodes at the time. And then after that, Pizzola put me on Circles Off, which I was thankful for. And, when I went on Circles Off, some people were calling me out as a fraud, etc. And then, I came out and kind of defended myself. I mean, it's no secret I have footprints online going back, 20 plus years now. I've been gambling professionally, as a poker player for 10 years. Probably have 30,000 posts on, internet forums when I was playing poker, etc. And nobody really heard of me before I went on Circles Off. And that's because the reason why nobody heard of me, because I wasn't one of those guys that's out here blasting my edge on Twitter saying, yeah, hey, I've won fucking 65% of my prop bets betting, NFL and college football player props for the last 5 years. But I think for me, like coming out and doing a little media was like kind of a turning point for me, as in the markets were getting harder. And I felt like, there is some trade-off. You do media, maybe it's going to help you network, etc. And I knew that. And it's some type of trade-off. Like the guy who's my mentor in this, he told me, like, you don't want to give your secrets away, this and that. But at some point, maybe you do need to do that. And it's to help me immensely. And then after the Circles Off, I started doing a lot of writing. I wrote these Maniac Chronicles. Anyone go to my highlights tab on my Twitter if you haven't read those. I wrote like 10 to 15 articles that a lot of people liked, and a lot of pro bettors liked. But at the end of the day, I was considering writing a book, etc. I did all that writing maybe to prepare for that, and there's a lot of stuff I still haven't talked about that I've done. But, podcasting gave me, I guess it just gave me a means to just broadcast all this stuff out there. A lot of this stuff could go into a book. I can share a lot of stuff. I've met a lot of people through doing this podcast. I knew that would help. And I've helped a lot of people. And I appreciate everybody that listens to this podcast. I've gotten so many DMs, people. I never thought of that. You helped me with this, you helped me with that. I really appreciate all of that, and it feels good to give back and help people, because a lot of people have helped me along the way. So whatever. That's just kind of the progression of the whole media thing, how I got into doing all the, getting on Circles Off, then getting, doing all the writing, and then, a lot of the writing stuff I can just translate into podcasts. And the stuff that I come up with every week that I see that I can, that it will go well in podcast form, because it's current, it's happening, and it's happened to me. So I'm chronicling what is going on. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just kind of a natural progression over the last couple of years. So yeah, I appreciate everybody that listens. Hey, good evening, Shiner. I came across your Gambling Chronicles podcast, and it was excellent. I've almost caught up with all your podcasts. My favorite line was that you defeated every account that's ever been brought to you, with the exception of one. One account just has some outdated software, and you have to be on the ball to bet this account. It's just a very tricky account, and it actually got punted away. But yeah, every account that anyone's ever given me has either gotten cut off on the back end by a bookie, or I've beaten it, or I've given it to somebody to beat it. So let's see here. I have a question. Cannot work out. I was hoping your experience, you could point me in a direction. I'm currently working with a partner. We have a shared bankroll. When we take over accounts, we give 20% profit to the person that provided the account. When we send out bets we need placed on Telegram for accounts, we don't fully control. We give those guys, all right, those accounts we don't fully control. We give those guys a 20% free roll, okay? My partner and I have been consistently able to come up with our own bets to place, send out to Telegram partners to get down for us. Hold on, let me see here. Did I double post this? All right, yeah, hold on. I don't see the question here. All right. We cannot figure out how we would work out if we partnered up with an originator, or if we provided bets by another group when they're expecting us to get down for them because we were giving a 20% free roll. Well, how to figure out how it would work if you partnered up with an originator, you have to come to an agreement. Are you going to get them X amount? What are you going to get them? What are you going to do for them? How much are they going to want? Is the originator going to want hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars? Because if you're giving 20% to guys that are getting accounts and betting into them, I guess a solid originator is going to want more, unless you're getting a new originator from the ground up. Then you're going to need to field accounts. You're going to need to get accounts, or get the plays from. You're going to have to figure the math side out on just how to get all that stuff working to make the originator satisfied. So that's the key. If you're working with originators, you need to keep them happy, or they just won't work with you. I've had some that have come to me and said, hey, I have this, it's great. I could beat NBA overnights and this and that. And they say, how much can you get? Maybe you can't get enough for them. And if you can't get enough for them on certain markets or at certain times, then you just don't work with them, and it's fine. You just move on. But you need to find something that works for both sides. That's pretty much it. You're just going to kind of have to feel through it and just kind of figure it out. Just make sure the math works. Let me see here. Thank you for your time, and thanks for putting your podcast out there. It's helped me to determine if I should burn an account quickly and what types of bets I should send out to my Telegram guys compared to the accounts brought to me. You made it clear. They expect the high EV stuff, and if their account gets burned, they come back to me and still want to be part of what's going on and find a way. That's it. I mean, you got to find a way to find accounts. Everybody, you're gonna burn accounts. You just need to find more. And if you can't find more, then you need to find a way to do something else that's gonna keep you in action. Brogan Jeff, how do you calculate bet sizing? Is each bet strictly 1% of your bankroll, or is it more heavily weighted toward what your edge is? Look, if I have I'm going to bet as much as I can if I have a big enough edge. I've never had any structured bankroll management. I just knew I had a big edge, and I continually bet more as I seen more, as I didn't go on downswings. If you're not going on downswings, then you should overbet. That's just basically it. I'm not one of the, I don't even know what the fucking Kelly criterion is or any of that shit. I don't know anything about that. I just know when you have a bigger edge than a 1% or 2%, MLB side or total, when you have like a 19% edge, like I was talking about earlier, or maybe more common these days if you're crushing, maybe you have a 10 to 15% edge on some type of prop market or smaller. You just bet more. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe bet 1% until you know that you have a bigger edge in a certain market, and then you just need to press it more. How much? I don't know. It's different for everybody. I just know that the most successful poker players took shots when the games were good. And it's the same thing with a lot of sports bettors. Either the stuff was insanely weak and they were able to scale, like based off of that. Now maybe they do something different. But that's usually how it goes. You just fucking crush, and then you build your bankroll, and you can just do a bunch of different things. So I don't know. It's different for everybody. I would just say be pretty strict until you have a big edge, then you go hard. One more. Could you review what a fair poker staking deal looks like for an above average non-pro player? I mean, really depends. I've been staked, cash staking. Let me see here. Cash staking, I think I was getting like 80, 85% with makeup. Tourney, I think a buddy of mine ran the math. This was so long ago, it might not even be right, but what he came up with was, you're either 50-50 with makeup, something like that, or whatever you decide upon. But I think fair for tourneys is like 80% with no makeup. Just 80%, 20% of what you cash, you get. Might be 10%. Let's just call it 15 to be fair. But it worked out to something like that. And the guy I think that figured this out is like a math professor. Like 15% on average across the board in most general tourneys, and this was on tourneys when they were softer 20 years ago. That's what was somewhat fair. But cash, you should be getting probably 80% if you're beating the games. And then the backer is going to get 20%. It could be different. It all depends. Guys gave me 80% because I had like sustained results beating heads up. My bankroll ran to a certain point where I wasn't comfortable funding with my own money. So I got backers, and it helped me for a little while. But you don't want to be backed if you don't have to be. You want to get 100% of the profits. It's one of the, I wouldn't say dumbest things you could do. Sometimes you need it, but I know people that play poker being backed because they feel more comfortable, because they feel like they'll punt their own money off, but not somebody else's. I know a kid that's been doing that for 20 years, but he's also given away 25% of his profits. Let me see here. Next up, let me see. Makeup or no makeup? Yeah, Eddie Walls posted that. Makeup or no makeup should be covered. And I kind of did cover both of that. What stake is the tournament? Yeah, it's all different. I'm not in poker now, so like at the very high levels, some of those guys are playing for nothing. They're entering $100,000 buy-ins, getting 90,000 of them covered at like even. So they're basically playing for 10K in a 100K tournament. So like, I don't know, it's different all the way down. If you keep your friends close and your enemies closer, but then be friend and enemy, do you push them away? Well, if you keep your friends close and your enemies closer, can relate with that, but then be friend and enemy, do you push them away? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you just don't get them too close. That's all. And if you have to push them away, you push them away, but you just don't get them too close, because then you get fucked over. And believe me, it's happened to me before. There's a guy that fucked me over for about 25, maybe 50,000 on like rakeback stuff back in the day. I might have covered this at some point. I probably will in the future, but somehow got into a deal with this guy where I gave him all, I was referring players to, a rake back thing. I was getting kickbacks from it. This was a long time ago. And then this is back like Black Friday type stuff, like 15 years ago. And then he said, just run them through me, you'll get more. And then some stuff happened, and then I wound up losing them all. And then he kept them all. So, but that actually worked out to my benefit in one way, and I'll cover that another time. Next, let me see here. Hi, China, love the podcast. I've seen your tweet asking for questions, and I got a couple. What do you think is a good percent to give to people that are giving you accounts at the rec scale? Also, what is the best app web to track your bets? Okay, I'm going to hit that now. I don't track my bets. Never have. I mean, I did early just to see how much the stuff was winning at when I was building my bankroll, and yeah, they were winning like mid 60s. After that, I don't know. They're tracked in some spots, maybe one guy tracks one way, but I don't have some like ultimate spreadsheet that tracks everything drawn into the middle. That's just not, I just kind of go with the flow, and, I just look at my bank account. I can calculate my net worth. That'll pretty much tell me how I'm doing and whether I'm not doing good. But I'm pretty sure like what I'm doing, I'm in the right spots now. But if you're gonna track your stuff, I don't know, maybe track them on Betstamp. I don't know who else tracks bets. I've never get into that. It's an extra layer of something that I just don't want to invest my time in, and that frankly I wouldn't be good at. I'm not good with spreadsheets and shit like that. I tracked all my stuff by hand for like 2 years. How many did I win? How many did I lose? How many overs did I win? How many unders did I win? And it turned out that a lot of the overs I was losing, I was breaking even, maybe slightly winning at, and I was probably winning, low 70s on the unders, and then I had to make some adjustments. So whatever. I mean, I don't know. I'd go with Betstamp. Let me see. In case I wanted them as a portfolio if needed, maybe track them on a spreadsheet too. If you're good with that stuff, track them on a spreadsheet. See, and just have all that data ready to go. But then you have to live up to the billing when it comes time to show that to somebody. And just, you need to show them as much as you can if you want to start working with somebody. Let me see here. What's next? Hold on. Oh, that guy. Cheers from Spain. Look at that. We're getting around to different countries here. All right. Last question. Apologies if this has been covered. Had a question for the podcast for you. Say you have a futures position on OKC to win the finals, but by some updated math scenario, you see a plus EV position for another team to win the finals. How would you size the bet, given that if you bet it, it would be negative EV to your OKC position? Just use basketball here as an analogy. Appreciate the content. I mean, again, this is more of a question. I would next time Bet the Process has some type of Q&A. Pose this one to Rufus. This isn't my specialty. I don't know. I'm not a whiz in bet sizing. I'm not a whiz in math. So I just have no idea how you would approach this. I just know that, if you have a plus EV position, you would bet it. How much? I don't know. I would just do it by feel if I was going to do that. But I don't bet futures either. I feel like they're a waste of time, for me anyways. I'd rather just focus on stuff that's going to clear, stay away from the futures. I was given a nasty lesson on futures during the Biden-Trump one when, I had all those bets on Biden, and, half of them got wrecked because per head books just, I got cut off in the middle of that, and they just didn't pay me or whatever. So I don't know. I just feel tying up the money is stupid. Other people feel differently. Other people make money off it. But yeah, I'll plug Bet the Process. Go hit Rufus up, and I'm sure he can answer that question for you. That's pretty much it. Going on hour and 20 minutes here, longer than I wanted, but haven't podded in a while. Had a lot of notes. That's it. Stay strong. Have a good week.